Hi there, my name's Bruce Rain from Breakers Creations, and in this video I'll be testing out the new Ender-3 V3 Plus 3D printer. This is my Ender-3 V2. It's had a few upgrades, but it was my first 3D printer, it was a great printer to learn with, and a really solid performer. In September 2023, Creality released the latest iteration in its Ender-3 lineup, the Ender-3 V3, and this was a pretty substantial step up from the V2. Then in April 2024, Creality released the Ender-3 V3 Plus. All of the improvements of the V3, but with a whopping 300 by 300 by 335mm build volume. I received a couple of rolls of the Creality Hyper PLA. I've got a black roll and a white roll, and this Hyper PLA is specifically designed for the high speeds of these printers. Some assembly required. Quick installation guide here. And what have we got? That looks like the little display screen. Anyone with a Creality printer will be well aware of these little side cutters. Got these two motors down the bottom for the CoreXZ drive. Wee roll of Hyper PLA. Look at the size of that print bed. That is huge. Time for the instructions. Some screws here for the filament rack. The assembly was really straightforward. Just slot the spool holder onto the side of the frame, slot the frame into the base and secure it with 4 screws each side, 2 on the front and 2 underneath of each side of the frame. Attach the 2 stabilizer rods with a single screw at the top and bottom of each. Connect the ribbon cable to the touch display and then slot the display into position. Connect up all the cables and you're ready to go. Okay, I think we're good. Oh, it's nice and neat and tidy. Over here, there's a little window just in there, and looking inside there will show you the voltage. Well, I think we're at the point now where we can actually throw some power at it and see how it goes. So, some assembly, but nothing challenging there. The included USB stick has a short video detailing the assembly steps, so if you're not sure, you can refer to that. The cabling for the print head and the filament sensor are a little janky, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. The next step is to switch it on and then follow the on-screen instructions. Okay, so I'm about to start the self-tests. That's where it goes in and does the resonance compensation. So it's going to check for the vibrations when it's operating. Obviously, this is something you need to go through depending on where you position your printer. I'm going to do it here because I'm going to leave the printer here just for a little while, do a few tests. But when I put this in its permanent position, I'll need to go through and do this again. The printer will go through a self-check process, which does take a good long while. Then you're ready to start using your printer. I had the added step of a firmware update. After installing, I had to complete the input shaping and auto leveling for a second time. Loading filament is pretty straightforward. Put the spool in place, Then clip on this rather unusual anti-tangle device. Unlock the extruder using the little lever. Clip the end of your filament at a 45-degree angle. Then feed it up into the filament runout sensor, through the Bowden tube and into the print head as far as it will go. Lock the extruder. Then from the touchscreen select Prepare, the icon with the little sliders, press Extrude Retract, then press the Extrude button. It'll heat up the print head and then feed through the filament. When finished, discard the excess and you're ready to start printing. Before I start printing some tests, I'm going to take a look around the printer to point out a few features. Firstly, this is a CoreXZ printer. You may have heard of a CoreXY printer, but because the Ender-3 V3 Plus is still a bed slinger like its predecessors, meaning that the print bed moves for the Y-axis rather than the print head, it uses the core setup for the X and Z axes instead. Now you might be asking, why use a CoreXZ setup when the Z axis only needs very small movement, not like the speed and acceleration required for X and Y? Well, the answer is that the core setup allows the use of two motors for movement on a single axis. As a result, that extra power of a second motor allows for much faster acceleration and movement along the X-axis. The CoreXZ setup can deliver a blistering 600 mm per second print speed and 20,000 mm per second acceleration. And this printer has you covered on the Y-axis as well, as this gigantic print bed sits on two support rails and is moved by two separate stepper motors. There is a quick swap tri-metal nozzle which can reach a maximum temp of 300 degrees Celsius and a 100 degrees Celsius maximum for the print bed. It has a magnetic print bed with a textured PEI surface. The print head has two parts cooling fans, one at the front and one at the rear. I'll test the parts cooling thoroughly in a moment. There is a 4.3-inch colour touchscreen with an easy-to-use and intuitive interface and is driven by Creality's own variation of the Klipper firmware, which allows for resonance compensation, also known as input shaping, and mesh bed levelling. There is also a silent mode, which I'll test out a little later. And it's a small thing, but I really love the groovy little light on the print head. The Ender-3 V3 Plus does not include a camera, and the firmware is set up so that you can't use any old webcam for this purpose. So I went out and bought a Creality Nebula camera. I also designed a bracket for holding the camera that mounts to the rear of the filament sensor. While I do resent not being able to use my own webcam, I have to confess that the Nebula camera is really good. It's very inexpensive, very small, has a standard tripod mount at the base, swivels left and right and up and down, and it has manual focus, which is well suited for 3D print time-lapse videos. 3D printers are definitely changing. Gone are the days where it was only reserved for enthusiasts and tech heads. Printers on the market now are aimed at customers who don't necessarily want to delve into E-steps, tramming, retraction and flow rates. They just want to create or download models and print them without problems. From my experience, the Ender-3 V3 Plus definitely fits into this category. There was a USB flash drive included with the printer, which contains a number of pre-sliced models and an archive containing a PDF of the user manual, the Creality Print slicer software, setup video, a material guide PDF, and STL files of all the pre-sliced models included with the printer. I'm a Mac user, and it was disappointing to see the Mac version of Creality Print wasn't included on the USB, but this is easily downloaded from the Creality website. As with other Creality printers I've tested, there are a number of pre-sliced models already loaded into the printer. They have usually been optimally sliced for maximum performance on your printer. So I'm going to do my first print with the preloaded Benchy, which they say prints in 14 minutes. I loaded up the printer with the included white Hyper PLA and let her rip. This video hasn't been sped up. This is the actual speed of the printer, and there's no doubting the benefits of the CoreXZ setup. The quality is pretty impressive. Nice clean layer lines, a very slight droop in the bridging, but no real faults. Pretty amazing for a 14-minute Benchy on a printer that's had no tuning other than the default setup. Now I'll slice the Benchy for myself and compare. Since I received the printer, Creality Print version 5.1.1 has been officially released, so I'll be trying it out for the first time. I found the version 5 interface a bit more complicated than the version 4 interface, but I'm getting used to it. That flickering is a bug in the software. It's not labelled, but Control-I or Command-I on the Mac is the keyboard shortcut for importing a model. Setting up was easy. It was just a matter of going to the floating printer palette and adding a new printer. The Ender-3 V3 Plus was there under the Ender range of printers. Once added, I was ready to add a model. I loaded up the supplied Benchy STL, set the infill to 5%, and sliced. Next, I uploaded the G-code to the printer wirelessly from Creality Print, selecting one-click print so it would immediately get underway. If you visit the local IP address of your printer, you can see a basic web interface showing the printer's status. From here, you can start and stop files loaded on the printer, check the bed mesh, view the printer temp and fan speeds, and if you have a camera, you can see the output. The latest version of Creality Print appears to be a modified version of Prusa Slicer. The good thing about this is that it has the ability to add modifiers. So you can set different print settings to the areas that intersect with the modifier. This is super easy to use and is a really handy feature if you want to vary the levels of infill for the different parts of your model. When starting a print, the gantry initially raises right to the top and homes itself via a limit switch. Then it lowers all the way down to the print bed. During the raising process, it pulls filament off the spool, but when it lowers, that filament has nowhere to go. This creates an incredibly high risk of the filament tangling, which is why this weird anti-tangle device is included. It's especially important to use this when the spool is full. This contraption is definitely a pain to use, but until I come up with something better, it does actually stop the tangling. My sliced Benchy took about 39 minutes, and the results came out well. It's a far cry from the speed of the supplied 14-minute Benchy, but the provided slicer settings are more about consistent results on all prints, not just about getting a Benchy to print as fast as mechanically possible. The next thing I want to do is check the print area and test out the first layer quality. Once again, there has been absolutely no calibration other than the initial setup process. I created a box 300mm by 300mm by 0.2mm, designed to cover the whole print bed in a single layer. The results were excellent. A lovely, smooth and consistent first layer utilising the full 300 by 300mm print bed. The next challenge I threw at the printer was the suspended hand model. I noticed these suspended prints are quite the rage at the moment, and the strings are great for testing the parts cooling. The end result turned out really well. A bit of fine stringing on the hand, but otherwise perfect. I know that a lot of people in cosplay like these larger print beds, so I thought I'd have a go at printing a mask. My name is Bruce Rain, so a Batman mask seemed the most fitting. This one took about 15.5 hours to print, but the end result was really good. It's a shame it was made for someone with a far smaller head than mine. These interlocking fidget cones seem to be pretty popular at the moment, and they're a great test for print accuracy. As you can see, they fit together perfectly. Both the white and black sections were printed with Creality Hyper PLA. I think print-in-place models are a great way to test accuracy, so I printed these snake scissors. A small piece came free from the bed partway through the print, but it still succeeded and the end result works well. This thing is actually really fun to play with. I wanted to test out some ABS filament, so I printed this spiral tower. I used the ABS defaults in the Creality Print software and it printed perfectly. But be warned that when using ABS, this giant print bed takes an absolute eternity to heat up to 100 degrees Celsius. I did use a little Magic Goo on the print bed to aid in adhesion. I printed a couple of torture tests, and it was at this time I thought I'd try out the Ender-3 V3 Plus's silent mode. But I couldn't find it. The manual said to go to the settings to activate silent mode, but I couldn't see it anywhere. In truth, the printer isn't that loud anyway, so it's not something I was terribly fussed about. I printed the all-in-one printer test and it came out really well. It passed all the tests with flying colours and the 80-degree overhang looked remarkably good. I also printed the torture toaster from ClockSpring. I used a little bit of Magic Goo on the print bed to give it the best chance of success. Good bed adhesion is essential for the torture toaster. The end result is excellent. The toaster mechanism works as it should, as do the two gear locks on the doors. There's a bit of stringing on the 80-degree bridge, but no failures there. The 0.5 and 0.4 tolerance pins are moving quite freely, and the 0.3 came free with a little help. The 0.2 and 0.1 aren't moving. I'll start off by saying I really like the Ender-3 V3 Plus. It was quick and easy to assemble and set up, and the built-in calibrations were enough to get perfect prints straight out of the box. The CoreXZ setup is blazingly fast, and it's quite spectacular watching that giant print bed flying back and forth under the power of two stepper motors. The 300 by 300 by 335mm build volume sells itself. I love being able to print really big models at high speed. The touchscreen interface is easy to use and intuitive, and the functionality is consistent with other printers like the K1. The integration between the Creality Print software and the Ender-3 V3 Plus is excellent. Using the one-click print option across a local network is really convenient. Parts cooling is pretty good. The speed the print head moves means it has to be light, which limits the size of the fans you can attach to it. I've customised some of my other printers with very powerful parts cooling, so my standards are pretty high. But this is one of the sacrifices you make for high-speed printing. Having said that, it passed every bridging test I threw at it. The filament sensor works well. One of my prints ran out partway through. I was able to load a new spool and continue the print without skipping a beat. Creality use a scaled-down version of the Klipper firmware on the Ender-3 V3 Plus. Expert users will be frustrated by the limitations, but novices will appreciate that it just works. The power of Klipper in the hands of someone who doesn't know what they're doing would be a technical support nightmare, so I don't criticise Creality for doing this. And if you are an expert user, you can always root the firmware and install the full suite of tools to suit you. The high temperature printhead printed ABS filament without any issues. I feel like a printer of this calibre should have a camera included. I think it's what the market expects these days. Creality advertised the Ender-3 V3 Plus print speed as 600mm a second, but the supplied slicer settings are half that. I accept that high print speeds can have an impact on quality, but it would have been nice for them to include a high-speed print profile for people who want to live on the edge. Either that or advertise the print speed as 300mm a second. I feel like the Creality Print software is a little buggy. It flickers constantly on my computer. I don't know if this is related to the Mac version, but the flickering was there in version 4.3.8 and is still there in version 5.1.1. But it does a good job of the slicing, and the land printing gives an easy print workflow. Loading the filament is a bit fiddly, especially if the gantry is low. If you don't have rear access to the printer, which I don't, you have to feel around to find the hole in the filament sensor and feed in the filament. I have become pretty good at this now though. The filament holder is pretty janky, especially when your spool is full. This seems like a pretty big design flaw, and I did end up with a situation where I forgot to attach the anti-tangle thingamy and the filament got in a knot, which resulted in a failed print. It's my intention to try and come up with something better than the supplied anti-tangle device, as I found it pretty fiddly. Because the Ender-3 V3 Plus is a bed slinger, the large print area means you need a lot of space around the printer, about 700mm. Where I have it positioned, I only just have enough space at the back. Any closer and the print bed would hit the wall. I would also recommend placing the printer on a sturdy platform, as that big print bed flies back and forth so fast it creates some powerful vibrations. You don't want your printer bouncing onto the floor. The print bed can reach 100 degrees C, but be prepared for a decent wait for it to get to that temp. It takes about 15 minutes to heat to 100 from room temperature. It's a lot quicker for PLA temps though. I couldn't find the advertised silent mode, but I didn't find the printer particularly noisy anyway. It is certainly a lot quieter than the Creality K1. I have it in my office and it's quiet enough so that I can still have online meetings without it drowning out my voice. But despite any criticisms I might have, I'm still absolutely rapt. The Ender-3 V3 Plus is fast and has performed virtually flawlessly for me in all my tests. And the large print volume allows me to take on a whole new range of projects. I printed this custom computer case in the style of early vintage Macintosh computers, and there's no way I could have printed this in one piece with my other printers. I have a video of this build project coming out soon. I'd like to thank Creality for sending this printer to me. I received it for free, but I have not been paid for my opinions, which are always open and honest. If you're interested in buying an Ender-3 V3 Plus, there is a link in the description along with a discount code. Thanks for watching.